What's up, Spice Rack, and welcome back to Spice's Diary, where every bite feeds the soul and every story heals the heart. And you guys, I am up here to talk about my life. And right now, I'm going to share a little bit about my relationship. I've coined myself the retired prison wife because my husband served 22 and a half years for a crime he didn't commit, and I served every single one of those days with him. He has been home. Pookie is home. Can y'all just stop and give that a second? Because that is always still big news. Pookie is home. You have no idea how many days and nights I prayed and cried
Ugly crying
and
too,
dreamed
girl.
for him to come home. And now that he's here, it's sometimes is easy to forget how much we dreamt and waited and wanted that, because life has really just came in.
As my husband
It
would
came
say,
like it was coming from the streets, and it has not stopped 1 second since he's been here. When he first came home, the transition was straight into work release. And so it was also in the very middle of COVID. So that meant everything that was normally scheduled programming, they had a new revised schedule. And when he went to work release, that meant I didn't get to take him to work release. I didn't get to go visit him at work release, which we were supposed to get weekly visits he could earn up to 30 hours home a
no
week.
overnights, but we'll
But
take
because
it.
of COVID, they shut all that down. They didn't even let me come in and do our regular visitation, which I think they had those for 3 or 4 hours once a week, and we didn't get to do that either. So COVID made his transition home really hard, but yet we were still so excited because, he was free. The likelihood of me getting to him was more of an option because he was so close to being home. One of the perks they did give us, because Pookie's behavior was really good and we had a good track record, is that his job that he was working, it ended at 11 o'clock at night, and there weren't any buses that were running. So they allowed me to pick him up, and they gave us 30 minutes for me to get him from his job back to work release. And that 30 minutes always gave us about a 10 to 15-minute grace period where we could just sit in the car across the street and kind of just talk and chop it up and hug and, make out a little bit.
Mind your own business.
Because we had been missing each other, and it was something we were looking forward to every day. And then another thing I did was, I wasn't supposed to do this, but I did it. Now that he's home, I don't care. I'm telling you. On his lunch break was every day at 6:30. And y'all, I was a cooking fool. I was making all of these meals. I had courses. I had it all packaged up. And every day at 6:30, I would bring him some home cooked meal. And if it wasn't home cooked, it was something that he'd been craving. So sometimes he'd want stuff like Jack in the Box or Burger King, or just that, that crap that he never got to get. And so we'd sit in the car for a half an hour and we'd eat, and we would just talk. And then we'd split again, and I'd leave him there, and then I'd come back a few hours later to pick him up to take him home for the night. But that's how we spent the first 6 months of him being home. I remember he was supposed to be able to come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Nope, that didn't happen. The night before Thanksgiving, I think it was Thanksgiving, but a man in there ended up committing suicide. He had gotten a hold of some drugs and overdosed. And so that shut everything down even more. So the little bit I was getting to talk to him and see him stopped. They closed it down. So he wasn't even going to work, I don't think, for a week or so.
COVID was a crazy, crazy
So,
time.
man, it was something. And then he finally came home. And the crazy thing is the day he came home, which was February 17th, was the day that he got arrested. Is that not crazy? So exactly 22 years to the day he walked into our home, and that's the same day he walked out of his home. Stuff like that, just that blows my mind. I don't know. I think things like that, when they happen like that, it felt so final. Yes, we are done with that. However, we weren't quite done. He was home and he was on his monitoring bracelet. So he was on that monitoring bracelet for about 6 months. Now, the reason that he came home in that way, he came home with the work release and then he went into the monitoring bracelet. Washington State had just instituted this new program. And if you had been doing well on your time and programming well and showing that you were trying to do well to come back out here, or that you were a good candidate, they had this thing called graduated reentry. And at the time, it was letting you come home a year earlier than your projected date, but you had to do it through the work release and 6 months, and then 6 months of home monitoring. And so we got that was a blessing for us. He got to come home a whole year earlier than he was supposed to, even though he shouldn't have been there at all. When he came home on work release, yeah, I told you about that whole process about we didn't get to really see each other very much because of COVID. So then when he came home on the ankle monitor,
such a huge blessing.
It was like, oh my God, he's here for the very first time. He'd never come here before. Even though I snuck to see him at on his lunch breaks, he never snuck home. We just were too close to even risk that. He'd catch the bus and be driving the bus right past our house, but he would never sneak home. And I'm kind of glad he did, because if they had to drove by, if they had seen him walking somewhere that he wasn't on schedule to walk, if they saw him getting in or out of my car, anything like that, they would have violated him and took him back. And after already doing so much time for something we didn't do, we did not want to do any more time. So we played it by the rules for the most part.
Call us scary berries if you want to.
But one thing that COVID kind of messed up is that the reason they did the graduated reentry is so that we could kind of start to graduate into reentry. Like he would be able to slowly integrate where he'd get to come home and kind of see how house works.
I was looking forward to the progression of him coming home.
We'd spend some time together, just kind of like slowly acclimate in. But we didn't get that with work release. So now he's plopped here with his home monitoring, and the biggest thing here is that we have to schedule every single thing that he does, and it has to be scheduled a week in advance. Can you imagine? Who even knows what they did yesterday or what they're going to do tomorrow? Like, we were having to schedule so far in advance.
And it had to be a detailed list.
We knew the basic things. Like, he had to go to work every day, and we put that in the schedule. But then if it was like a date, we'd have to plan that ahead. So it was really hard to plan things with people, because we have to know so far ahead of time that it was going to be in writing.
Took some thinking ahead and planning.
We were doing a lot of things, because I think that forced us to really make sure that we didn't get stuck in the house. We had to think ahead and plan ahead. And so Babe was really good at being like, let's go here, let's go do this. And then plus, we had a lot of just errands to do. Like, he had to get his ID. We had to first get his ID, then we had to get him his driver's license and do all that. He needed certain clothes for work. He needed shoes for work and clothes for just regular. So there were little things that we had to do to just get him back as a part of society. And so it really was like there was always something going on. And then we'd plan in, family visits for him to visit my family, or for them to come over here. And a lot of times that was just how we would socialize, is that people would come over to the house.
And that was so much fun. I was so excited. He was so excited. We were trying to catch up and make up for old times and just see the things and do the things that we couldn't do. And for some reason, that ankle monitor and us having a schedule really motivated us to be on top of that. But also during that time, what I really started to see is that he was home and I still was very much involved in his life. Meaning, if he needed a ride, a lot of times I would provide that unless he had to catch the bus if I was not available. But because it was still kind of COVID, I had some flexibility, so I could take him a lot of times. But my schedule became his schedule, and vice versa. Well, not really vice versa. It was more of the same, of me kind of fitting him into my world and him just kind of living his life. I'm like, wait, so now what time do I need to be here to get you? That was hard for me. I don't think I was expecting it. And that kind of just started to snowball. And one day I was like, wait a minute. I've been doing this for how long? And that was because you were in there. And now you're home and I feel like I'm still doing a lot of the same. Why is that? Why is it that I feel like not a lot's changed for me? That was really the beginning of me trying to analyze, like, Spice, what do you need from this relationship? What is it that you want your relationship to look like now that you have your partner home? And that was something we both had to reconsider, because all this time my life was devoted to him. And now I was like, wait a minute. I think now we can have some of this life and time devoted to me. So then that posed a question. What is it that you want? What do you want your life to look like? And you wouldn't believe how hard it was for me to answer that. It was hard to answer that because I realized I'd been living a life that everybody else wanted me to live. And now it's my turn. Finally.
I'm about to do it, y'all. Just watch.